Hi guys, I've been promising to do some guitar lessons for a while now, so I thought I'd begin. And I'm going to start with a lesson for those of you who've just picked up a guitar. So we're going to learn some of the basics of playing a guitar, including some simple chords. But we're going to begin just by looking at the strings and naming the strings. So we're going to begin with the first string. Now the first string is the one nearest the ground, this one here. Now this string is the E string, that's the note of the string, the E string. So that's our first string. If we go one down, that's our second string. Now that's the B string. And if we go down again, we have our G string. Next string, D string. Next string, A string, and finally our sixth string is our bottom E string. So I'll go down the other way this time, starting from the bottom. This one here, the E string, A, D, G, B, and E. So the first thing, the most important thing, is to get used to the names of those strings. So when I start referring to chords and where our fingers go, you're going to be able to pick up on that straight away. So next thing, we're going to look at some chords known as major chords. Now, the easiest way to tell a major chord is it's very happy sounding. These are all major chords. They're all very bright, very jolly, and they're some of the most common chords that are used on the guitar. So we're going to start with a chord called an A major chord, A major. Now the way I'm going to break this down, I'm going to do this finger by finger and tell you exactly where to place it on the guitar. Now you can see these boxes, now these are known as frets. So that's what I'm going to refer to when we have to start placing our fingers on the fretboard, which is this. So an A major chord, we're going to start with our index finger. And the index finger goes on the second fret, this one here, of the D string, which if you remember was our fourth string from the top. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and the second fret. So that's in there. Next finger is our middle finger, which you could go on the second fret of the G string or the third string. So 1 closer to the ground. And our ring finger is going to go on the second fret of the B string, which is 1 closer to the ground still, the second string. So I'll show you that one, it's in there. Okay. So all together, like that, and with our right hand, we're just going to use our thumb now to play the strings. We're just going to use the side of the thumb, playing a downward motion like that. And in terms of how many strings we have to play to make this chord, we're going to play all the strings except the bottom E string. We're not going to play that in an A major. So the chords should sound something like this. So that's our A major. Now a few tips when you're starting out with these chords. We're going to be using the ends of our fingers right on the fingertips, and we're going to use those to fret the guitar. Now we also will make sure, if you can see here, if you look at my fingers, they're all nicely bridged, okay? So they're not flat like that, they're all kind of nicely bent, okay? And that's what enables us to use the fingertip. So an A major chord sounds something like this. Okay. Now the reason we use the tips of our fingers and make sure our fingers are bridged is that we notice that with this chord, the top string, there's no finger on that string. We're just letting that ring out. Now if our finger wasn't bridged, it would slightly dampen the string. You can hear that. It won't ring properly. So that's why we have to use bridged fingers. We get that sound. So that's our A major chord, okay? Second chord we're going to look at is a D major chord. Now I'm going to talk you through it, same again. So we're going to begin with our index finger, and this goes on the second fret of the third string or the G string. So that sits there. Remember to use the fingertips. Middle finger on the top string, second fret. And finally ring finger on the string in between, the second string or the B string, on the third fret. And with our right hand, we're going to play top 4 strings So we don't play these bottom two here. We don't play the bottom E, the 6th string, or the 5th string. We're going to avoid those. So just the top 4. So that's our D chord, and it should look something like that. Okay? Next chord, E major. Sounds like that. Finger by finger again. Index finger on the 1st fret of the G string, which is our 3rd string. 1, 2, 3. And on the 1st fret. Middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 5th string, our A string. You can see that there. And finally our ring finger on the 2nd fret of the 4th string, our D string. And with our right hand, we play all the strings. So that's our E major. So that's 3 major chords so far. Next chord, G major. Looks and sounds like this. Finger by finger again. Index finger on the 2nd fret, the A string or the 5th string. Middle finger on the 3rd fret of the bottom E string, the 6th string. And finally, a little bit of a trickier move, our ring finger on the 3rd fret of the top E string. I'll take the other fingers away just to show you where it is. Now with the other 2 fingers, and we play all the strings with our right hand. And that's what we're looking for, okay? Remember, I'm using the tips of the fingers again. Now you'll find to start with, this chord can be quite a battle. You have to wrestle with your fingers to get them all sitting. But it's important to make sure that you break down each string like this. And make sure that every string is ringing out properly. Because you'll see a lot of people just strumming. And it covers a lot of your mistakes up. And we want to be aiming for accurate chords all the time. So be really kind of precise about it. Break down the strings. And make sure they're all sounding as they should, all ringing out properly. So that's our G chord. And our final chord is our C major chord. Now, finger by finger, index finger on the 1st fret of the B string, or the 2nd string, 1, 2, 1st fret. Middle finger on the 2nd fret of our 4th string, our D string. And ring finger on the 3rd fret of the A string, our 5th string. And with our right hand, we're going to play the top 5. We're just going to avoid the 6th string, bottom E. So it should sound like this. Okay. Now, out of the 5 chords we've looked at, that's probably the trickiest for a number of reasons. You can see in this chords, we're playing 5 strings and our fingers are on 3 of them. Now that means the other 2 are open strings. There's no fingers on those strings. They're just ringing out. So that's why it's really important that we're using the tips of our fingers and we're keeping our fingers bridged. So these strings ring out. So all together, sounds like this. And now obviously when you begin, if you've never picked up the guitar before, or you're very new to the instrument, that's going to be tough to start with. There's no easy way of doing it. A lot of people, ask me for a quick fix or something like that, but there isn't an easy way. You just have to practice, hours and hours. But if you're dedicated enough and you just spend, enough time a day, just a few minutes a day, getting used to these chords, you'll get there in the end. So those are our 5 chords. So first thing we have to do is get used to those shapes and make sure everything is ringing out as it should, using the tips of our fingers as I've mentioned before. And when we get to the stage where we're feeling fairly good about these, the next thing is to practice moving between them nice and fluently, just by kind of going through them like this. You can also visualize the chords. You don't have to have a guitar in front of you in order to practice. Because your brain's getting used to these movements, if you can visualize them in your head and kind of see where the chord should be moving, you'll find that the results will come a lot quicker. and you'll be able to move this fluently really quite soon if you dedicate enough time to it. So there's the mental aspect as well as the physical aspect of moving your fingers. Now, exercises we can use to get these movements up to speed is we're going to pick chords to move between. We're going to call these chord progressions because we're cycling between chords. So our first one we're going to do is the one I just played, which is a chord progression starting with A major. We're going to go between A major, D major and E major, and then back to A. Now we're going to do this to a pulse, and we're going to count in groups of 4, because you'll probably know that's the most common sort of time in music, is counting in groups of 4. So if I demonstrate, so we're going to play the chord, hold it for 4 beats, and then between beats 4 and 1, to the next bar, we're going to move to the next chord. So let me demonstrate. So 1, 2, 3, 4. A, 2, 3, 4. D, 2, 3, 4. E, 2, 3, 4. A, 2, 3, 4. So I'm giving myself a set time. So you're also going to get used to playing to a pulse, to a rhythm, which is crucial in music. You need to be able to have this in the metronome so you can move and play fluently and in time. So that's what you need to get used to. You can obviously set the pulse yourself, but you can also use things called metronomes. Now these days you can get an app on your iPhone, a metronome app, which you can set a click, and that will just keep going throughout. It's a very good way of practicing because there's no margin for error with a click. It's not going to adjust to you. Whereas if you're setting the pulse yourself, you're obviously bound to kind of slow it down to fit your chord movement. But if you have that pulse that's rigid, you know you're going to have to move in time. Now you should start very slowly, a tempo that you're comfortable with, and it can be, it can be really kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, etc. As you get more comfortable with that, that's when you want to build up the speed and get used to those progressions. Okay, so that's the progression starting with an A chord, A, D, and E. Now I'm going to give you another 2 progressions to practice using the chords we already know. So the next one we're going to do is starting with a G chord, moving to a C, moving to a D, and then back to a G. Exactly the same process as I did with the progression before, counting groups of 4 and moving between the chords. So 1, 2, 3, 4, C, 1, 2, 3, 4, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, and G, 1, 2, 3, 4. And our final progression, we're going to start with a D, go between D, G, A, and then back to D. So with those 3 progressions, which were A, D and E, G, C and D, and D, G and A, we're going to use all the chords, the 5 chords that we've learned, but in different orders, in different sequences. So we're going to get used to moving from all kinds of directions. Now, to start with, you'll find you'll be able to move to some chords easier than others. Some will take a bit more time to get used to the movement, but the only thing that I can emphasise is persistence, and just be confident that you're going to practice and you're going to get better. Okay, because it's difficult for everyone to begin with. I remember when I started, got really frustrated, but you've just got to get on with it really, and just plough on through. And in a pretty short space of time, you're going to start reaping the benefits, and you're going to start moving fluently, and all these chords are going to sing out, and then you can start playing some of your favourite songs. Okay, because ultimately, these chords that we're looking at, major chords, they're the most common chords really. In another lesson, we'll look at some other common chords, but these form the basis of a lot of pop music that you'll hear. There's obviously lots of exceptions, but these are the core. So if you can get these down, you're off to a really good start. Great, so that's our first lesson, okay? So I want to hear requests of certain things you want to learn if you're more advanced, or if there's certain beginner things that you're unsure of, or certain exercises you want to learn. I want to hear what you want, and hopefully we can get a fair few of these videos going. Wicked guys, take care, and I'll see you soon for another lesson. Cheers.